So do we have a quorum?
Yeah, we do have a quorum. So Peter, anytime you want to start, it's fine.
Okay, great. Well, let's call the meeting to order if we're not expecting anyone else to join in. And Richie, do you want to handle the preamble for us, please?
Yes, sir. I'll do the preamble and and call roll. So notwithstanding any provisions in our bylaws to the contrary as permitted under Albemarle County's continuity of government ordinance, this authority's resolution adopted on May 14th, 2020, Chapter 1283 of the 2020 Acts of the General Assembly. We are holding this meeting by real-time electronic means with no authority member physically present at a single central location, as it is unsafe to do so because of the COVID-19 pandemic. All authority members are participating electronically. This meeting is being held according to Section 6 of the county's continuity of government ordinance. All authority members will identify themselves and state their general physical location during the roll call, which we will hold next. Public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both is provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is also invited to offer live comment during the meeting's public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone interested in commenting should send a chat or question to the meeting facilitator. If you are listening by telephone, please use the *9 feature to notify the facilitator. All speakers must identify themselves and the magisterial district where they live or have business. Public is always invited to send questions, comments, suggestions to the authority through the county's community development office at any time. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. And we'll just close in saying, I hope this is the last time I have to read this. All right, roll call. Let's see. Jay Fennell, I understand he's absent. All right, Peter Taylor.
That's Peter Taylor in Albemarle County.
John Moore. Sherry Buttrick. I know Sherry's here.
Sherry, do you want to just think?
Sorry, I was muted. Sherry Buttrick.
Whitehall. Rose Emery.
Rose Emery for Union.
Yes.
Mr. Emmett, David Emmett.
Dave Emmett at my office in Charlottesville.
David Mitchell. David Mitchell. Jenny Moore.
Jenny Moore at my home in Crozet.
And let's see, Dr. Moses, Hamilton Moses.
In North Garden.
1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 6 members present, and that's a quorum.
Great, thank you, Richie. So let's kick off the meeting. First, I ask for approval of the agenda with one exception, that we're going to change the order and speak to a boundary line adjustment after the Riggery VDOT discussion. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as such?
Yes, Peter, did we conclude last time that we would accept public comments at the beginning?
I don't have a view on that question, Chip. Richie, do you have a perspective?
My recollection is that the answer to that was yes, that was the authority's preference, that they take comments up front, but that if there were public comments that were germane to the issues or to the items that are on the agenda, that they would be taken up when those items were called.
That was the procedure that we adopted some years ago, and I think it had fallen by the wayside, but I would endorse continuing it.
Well, why then don't we ask if, in fact, there are any public comments for the committee review?
I don't have anybody with their hand up at this time.
Very good. Chip, thank you for that clarification for an old man. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda as spoken?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
Yeah, I moved. I'll do it.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Richie, let's move on to the first item on the agenda, the Riggery VDOT easement, please.
I'm sorry, can I just interject one thing really quick? In attendees, I see John Moore. So
Oops.
maybe, I think when I joined, I had to be promoted, so I don't know if he might be stuck in.
I just promoted him. He should be over any moment.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So Mr. Moore, are you, can you,
Reveal yourself.
I'm sorry?
Reveal yourself.
Oh, you reveal yourself and tell us generally where you are.
No, if he's there, I don't know where he is.
I don't either.
Tyranny of technology.
If he's there, he doesn't have his,
He hadn't got his video on.
nor does he have his microphone on. Now he has his microphone on.
Can you guys hear
John,
me?
are you with us?
We can't hear you.
I can hear you, John.
We can't see you.
There he is.
Hang on.
So John, where are you located generally?
I'm at my house in Albemarle County.
Okay, should we proceed with the discussion as mentioned?
Yes.
Scott or Richie, you want to carry it away?
I think Scott wanted me to address this. So the Riggery issue has to do with a parcel that is at the intersection of Route 20 and Prophet Road in Albemarle County, and we discussed this at length at the last meeting. VDOT is interested in making road improvements in that area. They presented designs for a traffic circle. It involved some grading on the Conniff property, which is the Riggery. But at the end of the day, when it's all completed, the plan is that although there will be some grading and some slight elevation on that roadside, there will be no pavement put over the easement, and the ground will be returned to a vegetative cover. The authority had some suggestions in terms of how we could improve or tighten up the easement. Mr. Conniff, he made some suggestions also. So if he's on, I thank him for making those suggestions. They were valuable. And so we did a red line version, circulated that individually amongst the board members. I know the original concerns, or some of the concerns, were, let me flip the page there. I think on page 3, there was concerns about structures being installed on the easement. The original deed, it indicated that there could be single pole direction signs or regulatory signs on there. But the board wanted it clarified that there wouldn't be any guardrails, sidewalks, other types of posts or shelters or benches or anything like that. So that language was added on page 3. Some additional language added was that if there were requiring, let's see, that towards the bottom, that the condition of the property had to be returned to its original condition, and it had to be consistent with the project design and plans, and consistent with the conservation easement deed. In terms of maintenance, VDOT was charged with being responsible for maintaining the property and could only maintain it. And that was one addition that the board suggested at the standard condition of the property at the close of the project, so that if VDOT engineering standards changed in the future, the close of this project would be the standard, not changes to VDOT's engineering standards. And then, of course, we added it must be consistent with the deed, with this deed and the original conservation easement. If there's going to be any change in the future, whether there is going to be an improvement or a change to the property that's even expected to deviate from the plan as presented to this board, then VDOT or the landowner would have to come to this board and obtain the authority's consent. Rose Emery pointed out that there's a grammatical change that I've noted. It has their selves, I think in the second or third paragraph on page 4, to change that to themselves. And I just want to assure Miss Emery, I've made note of that. And
Thank you.
and the final change,
It's extremely offensive.
no offense was intended. And then I think Chip had pointed out that in terms of the language on restoring the property to as close as practical to its prior condition, we struck that language and indicated that VDOT would promptly restore the site and the property to its condition and appearance prior to the start of the project. So we removed the as close as practical language. It's my understanding that that these changes were shared with the engineers or the design firm. I don't know if it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Scott can clarify that. I haven't heard if I haven't received a response as to whether they are whether they're in agreement with those changes or not. There was some question. I think there was a question in the past about whether this would constitute de minimis, a de minimis change to the easement, particularly to the road frontage. And I was asked to look into whether there was any case law on that. And unfortunately, there isn't anything definitive. There may be something instructive, but nothing definitive. Certainly, we can look at contemporary standards, which I think would indicate that if this were a more recent conservation easement, this would be a de minimis change and likely permitted. But there's nothing to say one way or the other. So that's kind of where we're at on it. I'll certainly entertain any questions. I'm not as counsel for this board, I'm not here to say that you're required to do this. I'm not recommending one way or the other. I think Ms. Buttrick, she probably identified it or summed it up pretty well, saying this is the best option out of a selection of bad options. But I do share that to some extent, but I don't think there's, I can't say that this board is in a position that it has to do this.
Richard, this is Richard Bennett representing VDOT. I just did want to confirm, that we had reviewed the document changes that you're presenting and are fine with those changes, and it's acceptable to VDOT, and even with the additional change tonight.
Richie, Chip Moses.
Yes, sir.
Are we incorporating the design plan that we've seen by reference in this document?
So the answer is yes. We are incorporating the design plan, and we are. I'm not an engineer. We're also incorporating the cross sections. I think that's the right word.
Well, the substance of the discussion a month ago was that alternatives to this process are not desirable and this is the best outcome or the least worst outcome. And on that basis, I would move that we approve the amended deed.
Now I'll second that. I think you tightened that language up very, just what we need, the best we can do.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Richie, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Richie,
Yes. Am I not on?
my question is, you there?
Sherry,
My
you're
question
coming
is,
in and
you don't
out.
see
Yeah.
any reason why. You don't see any reason why, because VOF is involved in the other side of the road on this, that I have to abstain from this or recuse myself. I don't think it pertains. I wouldn't normally do it, but I wanted your okay, just in case.
My opinion is, and I know you raised that before, my opinion is that it does not raise a conflict. One, because they're separate parcels, and VOF is not a party to this in any fashion. And finally, in terms of the transaction, either the VOF one or this one, you do not have a financial interest.
Okay. And they hardly told me what they.
Sherry, has VOF made a final determination on their parcel?
I believe they have. They had a board meeting today, but I was not there, so I don't know what might have transpired about that. I think it was on the agenda, but I think it was teed up to do something similar to this.
So Pete, go ahead, Mr. Bennett.
I'm sorry, Richie. We have received a letter from VOF indicating, that they have approved the similar, easement language over on the Rivanna Farms, property. I'm not sure whether or not there was any further action required from their standpoint there. They have not signed the easement document yet, but they have sent out a letter with their findings and determination.
Thank you.
And I had previously had communication with VOF, and I forget the gentleman's name, but he had indicated that the VOF had reached a final determination on an easement and language. In fact, they were
Justin and Stuart.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And I talked to him briefly in passing about it.
Yeah. And he shared with me the at least what I understand to be the final draft. So frankly, from that draft, that's where I picked up the notion that we would be third parties in interest in this.
Excellent. Well, we have a motion and a second, and if there's no further discussion, let's call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, Sherry's eye was delayed there. I'm sorry, everyone. Can I just get a confirmation, please, that was a, I believe, a 7-0 vote in favor. We should be doing these votes as roll call votes, if at all possible, just so Carolyn can track them more carefully.
Okay.
The overlap, since you can't see people all at once, it's difficult to track a voice vote.
Richie, do you want to run down the list for us, please?
I'll do that. And I had drafted, and last meeting we had a suggested motion. So perhaps I'll read a suggested motion and see if this suits. So the motion would be that I move that the authority finds that this conveyance under the stated terms and conditions will preserve the open space use of the subject land, that being the Riggery. The authority consents to and approves the deed of easement and authorizes the chair to endorse the deed of easement upon the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors approval and the county attorney's approval as to form and substance. And is that the intended motion? Oh, you have it up there, Scott. Thank you.
So Chip made the motion. Chip, are you willing to integrate this language into your motion?
Yes, I will amend the motion to conform to Richie's suggestion.
And we have a second on the same
And I'll
terms.
second that.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please.
All right, Jay Fennell, he's absent. Sherry Buttrick,
Aye.
Director Emery,
Aye.
Director Emmett.
Aye.
Let's see, David Mitchell, is he absent?
Yeah.
So here I know, Director John Moore,
Aye.
Director Jenny Moore,
Aye.
Director Moses,
Aye.
and Director Taylor.
Aye.
Okay.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Just to add a gratuitous comment, what we've just done is consistent with prior precedent of this body, in that we've only accepted such easements for utilities and so forth if they return the property to their prior state, and this accomplishes that.
Mr. Bennett, thank you for your patience and information as we went through this lengthy process.
I appreciate the board's action and
you.
look forward to moving the project forward. Thank you.
Great, great. Scott, do you want to move on to the second agenda item, the
Yeah.
boundary line adjustment, please?
Yeah, I'll just move this old business item up. Give me just a moment to share my screen. Okay, so this is an item that was on last month's agenda, but that we didn't have time to get to. So this is the Huckleberry Hill Farm ACE easement from 2007, which you can see there in its current form in the map, 237 acres. The deed states that boundary line adjustments within the property shall be approved if the adjustment is consistent with the easement. And so what we needed to do is establish that it was consistent. The terms of the deed state that the property was 3 parcels when it was put under easement. They were all under the same ownership. The property may be divided into as many as 3 separate ownerships. And if it is divided among 3 owners, at least 2 parcels must be 100 acres or more. So, sorry. I've got 2 pages to fit this whole plat in, but you can see there is revised parcel 19-1, which is 115 acres. Revised parcel 19-1G, which is 115 acres. And then the remainder is revised parcel 19-4, which is just over 6 acres. So the proposed boundary line adjustment is consistent with the terms of the deed as far as the acreage of the resulting parcels. Even though this is currently under 1 ownership, this would allow them to divide it among 3 if they so chose. And in doing so, they would be consistent with the requirements of the deed. We didn't find any other elements of the deed that in any way conflicted with this, or any particular specific site protections, which would be atypical for an ACE easement anyway. The boundary lines didn't cause any issues as far as conservation management or anything like that. So staff would recommend that the authority approve the requested boundary line adjustment as being consistent with the terms of the deed.
Scott, I'm sorry, can you go back to the property as it's currently configured?
So right now it's 2 moderately sized parcels and 1 very large parcel totaling, I think it was 237 acres. What we'd end up with be 115, 115, and 6.
I'm sorry. Okay, so this parcel in red right off Simmons Gap Road in its current form is how many acres?
The whole thing is 237. That first one, I don't have I can look them up if you need them, but I don't have the acreages of the existing parcels right in front of me.
Is that where they want the 6 acres to be though, in that?
Yes. Yeah, the 6 acres would be on Simmons Gap.
Well, it would look like that's on the order of, I don't know, 15 or 18 or 20 acres. Does that look right as a guess?
That's probably right. Let me see if I can find.
So I'm getting
think
the
it's on
two smaller parcels are 17 3/4 and 18 in 9/10. So that was a good call.
And
Yeah, complicated.
legally, if what they're proposing is consistent with the easement, do we have a say in a yes or no?
Well, the deed says shall be approved if they're consistent, and there's a little bit of, that's a little vague in that shall be approved by whom. We could assume that shall be approved means it must be approved and that staff can go ahead and do that. But the authority doesn't typically delegate that level of decision-making to staff. And so it seemed safer and more proper to bring it to the authority to confirm that approval.
Scott, I agree. In the context of that paragraph, the first sentence talks about approval in writing by the grantee, which would be this body. And then the next sentence talks about approval, a mandatory approval, if it's consistent with the easement. I think it's fair to conclude that approval needs to come from this body.
So I'm still unclear. To the extent that it's consistent with the easement, do we have the ability to say yes or no?
If you all made a finding that it was not consistent, I suppose you could. I could wish maybe that the deed was written more clearly one way or the other, either that it is okay for staff to do it, or that, I don't know, there was a higher bar. But given the way it's written, it reads to me as if that you all, if not must, then at least should approve it if it is consistent, and the grounds for not approving it would be that somehow it was not consistent.
Well, I think, Scott, what you need is not for us to approve it, but for us to make a finding that the proposed configuration is consistent with the purposes of the easement.
That would be perfectly sufficient, I think.
Which
I don't think we should be approving boundary line adjustments. Richie, I think you probably are aware that they're not favored at all by the IRS. I don't know what the statute of limitations on this thing is, but probably if we ever use the word boundary line adjustment, we should say internal lot line adjustment or boundary internal parcel adjustment.
So this would be a boundary line adjustment within the property.
Yeah, so I mean, let's just not reference it at all as just a boundary line adjustment, because that's just, kind of a little bit of the sort of phrase that draws fire these days. But also that's another reason why I think we should just find it consistent rather than approve an adjustment.
I think that language would be fine.
When was this easement granted?
2007. This was a purchased ACE easement.
Right.
Is there a statute?
So maybe
of
there's no tax
limitations on
consequence
that?
anyway.
No.
Is
no,
there a statute of limitations on changes?
not according to the deed.
Yeah, I don't feel they could be. Okay.
So the original parcels, there were 3 parcels to begin with, so we're not really dealing with a subdivision. I guess technically it is a boundary line adjustment. Is that correct?
It's purely an internal boundary line adjustment. That's right.
I mean, there's a very unfortunate choke point there where the driveway goes in, or I guess it's not up to us, but it looks like they're creating a problem there to me.
I looked at those measurements.
There's something in there about shared access along that driveway, which would have to be written into the deeds for those 2 big parcels. It's kind of down in the weeds and not really our thing, but it does stick out.
I think in terms of lengths, when I looked at it, the 2 longer, I guess the 2 outside parcels, that's 250 feet. And that middle one came in to about, it says 123. I thought it was closer to 150, but maybe it's just 123.
Is there any restriction on how many dwellings could be built on these various parcels? And if so, how are they allocated?
There are restrictions. My recollection, Scott, is that there was no directive in terms of how they're allocated. So I understand that would be up to the landowner.
And that's usually the case in the older ACE deeds, that they allowed a certain number of dwellings, but they didn't allocate where they would end up. Probably because they didn't know how they were going to manage the multiple parcels into the deeds at the time they did them.
Do we
And
know
this
how
is-
many dwellings?
Let's see. Hang on just a moment. I can find that for you. It'll take me just a minute. This current proposal, of course, wouldn't change that, but it'll take me just a moment to find the full text of the deed here.
God, I have it up. I don't know if
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, if you've got it.
I don't know if I can share. I don't know how to do that.
Even if you just tell us, Ricky, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. Well, so this says, in addition to one existing principal single-family dwelling unit, they can add up to 2 additional principal single-family dwelling units. And then they can add up to 4 secondary residential dwellings that are subordinate and incidental to the principal single-family dwelling unit. And then other standards. So there's 1 there, and that's two principals, and then 4 secondary.
Per parcel or for the entire property?
See, it's the entire property.
This action that we're being requested to take does not increase the number.
Change that at all.
No. In the placement of residents, Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the placement of the residents would still be governed by zoning. Is that right?
Yes, it would.
Of the
Yeah.
principal residences?
Yeah, the restrictions under zoning on placement on in floodplains and in critical slopes, things like that would still apply.
Well, like it or not, it seems to me we're bound by the question as to whether it's consistent with the easement, regardless of our personal view as the appropriateness of this change.
No, that's the question before the authority is the proposed change to the internal boundary lines consistent with the deed? I believe it is.
I mean, this is an issue with these ACE and co-held easements. Do we rubber stamp these, and do we have really anything to say except formally right now? So, and is it to be vetted simply because they're doing something consistent? Is it right for us to vet some of the premises of these agreements that were made in the past?
Well, we're the holder or co-holder of the easement, so yes.
And I think from the landowner's point of view, it's prudent to ask this body going forward so that they have, so if they do put houses on the property and the question arises later, hey, was there ever a determination? Then they have something that says, yeah, we have a determination that it's consistent. So that's not going to cloud your title in any way.
Richie, it might be a good idea to ask them to go ahead and allocate particularly principal dwellings and maybe the secondaries, just so that, I mean, worst case, you get 2 different landowners with a race to see who can build the 4 secondaries first.
That's clearly the rub here.
I'd defer to Scott, but I think it would be appropriate to put in the letter that the authority suggested that there be a definitive allocation of the residences to avoid problems in the future.
I mean, it couldn't, can't be reallocated, but in the absence of any allocation, you could end up with a problem between two of the three landowners.
Absolutely right.
Or a massing of structures on the 6-acre parcel, which to me is inconsistent with the concept of the conservation easement.
Oh, no, that's not going to be possible anyway under zoning.
Yeah.
That density level is just not going to be possible.
If they build 5 secondaries, then we have to sue them. I mean, let's not go there.
Let's not go there. So were we on firm legal ground to suggest that we want the allocation of structures before approving or not?
I think you're on firm legal ground to suggest. We just can't require.
Yeah, if we just explain to them why it would be prudent in the future to avoid a disagreement, most reasonable people will take it up.
So I believe I need a motion from the floor to table this until that information is garnered.
Well, from what Richie said, it doesn't sound like Richie is advising that requiring that before finding the boundary line adjustment consistent would be defensible. I think what we could do is send them the finding that if you all agree, find the finding that it is consistent with the deed, and then just to include a note in that letter saying, however, we
It's just
strongly
a
recommend that
suggestion.
you allocate.
It's a suggestion. You've got a legal document going, you could do it in. Just make sure that you put in the legal document that another deed of allocation could be made in future. But it's not anything binding. If they say hell no, then that's their problem. You want a motion?
So the motion is to find that that their proposal is consistent and to recommend that they allocate the residences amongst the parcels to avoid potential litigation or issues in the future.
Sure. Making note that a deed of reallocation could always occur. I'll make that motion if you want it.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Moore was first.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What was that? I guess that was everybody. Mr. Taylor, could you ask for votes against, just so I can be absolutely sure of the number, please?
Yes. Richie, will you just run down the roll call for me, please?
Yeah, let me find. Okay, let's see. So Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
John Moore,
Aye.
Sherry,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
let's see, David Emmett,
Aye.
and I think David Mitchell's not here.
Excuse me.
David Mitchell, Jenny Moore,
Aye.
Dr. Moses.
Aye.
All right, thank you all.
So it carries. Let's move on to the Fox Hill item.
All righty, so I don't have a lot of maps or graphics to show for this one. You all will have seen the memo regarding the Foxfield request, and I can bring that up if we need to see it on the screen. Oh, Sherry has. Oh, Sherry's departed.
Oh,
Thank you, Sherry.
Sherry has
I'm
disqualified
recused
herself.
out. I'm recused out, and you'll see Forbes sitting here in a second.
Thank you.
So Richie,
All right,
just to be clear for the record, in the absence of Sherry, we still have a quorum.
Yes. Well, one, we have 5, if I count correctly, so we still have a quorum, but her, even if she were to disqualify, she's still counted as a quorum for the meeting.
We had 7, so
So we're good.
Good. I
yeah, we're good.
want to have that on the record. Thank you.
Hi there.
All right. All righty. So just to review quickly while I'm trying to get this PDF to open. In 2019, the Foxfield Racing Association donated an easement on the Foxfield Racecourse Center. It's 178 acres. And when that deed was accepted, negotiated and accepted by the authority, it included a list, which is an Exhibit B of the deed, which I can bring up if needed, listing the event uses that would be permitted on the site. And so that was a fixed list of specific events. At the moment, we've received a request from the association to consider approving an additional event, which is not on that list. So an event that would not fall under the approval of a fixed list of events under section 231 of the deed, but an additional event that would be approved under section 237, which permits uses or activities not expressly set forth herein, but which are determined by the grantee in writing not to be a commercial or industrial use, to be consistent with the easement and not to interfere with the essential resources. So there's a couple of concerns here. I should go back to what's actually being proposed. This is a charity event, not commercial, in that the Foxfield Association is not charging for the use of the site. The Jack Fest organizers would be using this to raise money for children's medical care. And the event that's proposed to be up to 1,500 people, which would mean approximately 500 attendee vehicles would be parked on the site, and there would be family activities such as foot races and picnics and things like that. So the question before the authority is, as this is not permitted under the fixed list of events that were worked out before the deed was approved, could this be approved under the other commercial uses section? Staff would recommend that if the authority does find this approvable, that the use be subject to the same general criteria for the other event uses already approved, and that prior registration be required for the event, so we can keep the attendance limited to the requested 1,500 persons. We have representatives of the Foxfield Racing Association, Dr. Coles, and a couple of representatives of the Jack Fest organizers who are setting up this charity event, who are here to answer any questions you may have. And of course, Richie and I can answer your questions as well. So I suppose probably the next step is to just let us know what questions you have, and we can dive into that.
This is Forbes Reback. May I have some introductory words, please?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm helping Reynolds and the Foxfield present this to you. This, to me, is a no-brainer. This is not a commercial activity. It is not, obviously not an industrial activity. It is purely a charitable activity. And most of us in the community think of Foxfield, have always thought of Foxfield as a public resource, providing outdoor activities that the community can appreciate and enjoy. So Reynolds will tell you more about the actual event, but I just wanted to say that while this is not one of the 7 listed on Exhibit D to the easement, it falls squarely under this particular section 237, which is an escape valve and permits new activities on the property which which comply with the easement and do not harm. And in this case, it's completely out of doors, and will leave no scarring on the land. So with that, I would like to turn it over to you all for questions. Please direct your questions to Reynolds. I can butt in if I have to. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Coles, would you like to give us just a brief overview of how this came into you all and what this event looks like?
Sure, Mr. Taylor, thank you very much. Appreciate you all considering this. For one point of clarification, I represent the board of directors of the Foxfield Racing LLC, which is the leasee of the property from Foxfield Racing Association, which is Mr. Dick. And we have, as part of our purpose and charge in taking over the management of the property, was to certainly foster our charitable aims as revolves around the races. One of our recipients for the spring races for next year will be the Pediatric Cancer Center at UVA. And we look at this event as cross-pollination for that effort in helping that charitable group. It particularly applies here because Jack Fest is an event that's been held at Murray Farms in the past that raises funds for pediatric cancer patients and their families, particularly Ronald McDonald House, in housing their families when they have to seek this therapy. And we're talking about advancements in pediatric cancer and bone marrow transplants. And these children have had to go out of town, and they're on the verge of being able to provide that service here at UVA. So we think it's a very, very important charitable event. And we see it as a step forward in promoting that. We are not charging anything for the event. It was brought to us by the Lorenzonis initially and Emily, and they're on the call here today and can answer specific questions. But from our standpoint, we would be providing the parking area and the hayfield for the kids' activities. Yes, there is a food truck, and the food that they would serve that afternoon, the profits have been donated in the past back to Jack Fest. There would also be a beer wagon, same deal. We're not charging anything. They will help us clean up the pasture, the hayfield afterwards. Parking will be towards the front. The event is towards the back. It really will not even be within vision of Garth Road. And I think that kind of sums up Foxfield Racing's opinion towards the event. Happy to answer any questions.
Could someone, Ms. Callahan, maybe describe a little bit in detail what the event constitutes, the hours, the activities, et cetera?
Sure. So my name is Emily Callahan. I'm a resident of Charlottesville, and my son is Jack, for whom Jack Fest is named. To give you a little bit of our story, our son Jack was diagnosed with cancer when he was 3 years old. It's February of 2019 at UVA Children's Hospital. He went through some frontline treatments here, and then we were thought we were done, and then found out in June of 2019 that he was going to need more intensive therapies that were not offered at UVA. And so our family moved to Philadelphia and received treatment at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for, about 10 months. He went through 3 bone marrow transplants, radiation therapy, surgeries. And tonight, in about 15 minutes, I'm going to attend his pre-K graduation because he is in remission and doing very well. Throughout this whole experience, my husband and I have said, we need to do something more for families. We need to give back. We need to find ways that families like ours, we were fortunate in that we had the resources, we had insurance that approved for us to go to Philadelphia, but we know that's not the case for everybody in our area. And honestly, I would have preferred to stay at home. And so we want to do everything we can to, one, provide resources to UVA Children's Hospital to make sure that families don't have to go out of area, to bolster the Children's Hospital here, make it, I mean, it already is world-class, but even make it even better. And then to also for those families that do have to come here for care, we want to help support the Ronald McDonald House. Jack Fest was first thrown in 2019, very graciously by the Lorenzonis. It benefited our family and it benefited the Child Life program at UVA. That event entailed bounce houses. It was a carnival feel, bounce houses, food trucks. There was a kids foot race. There were as a scavenger hunt. It was a very family friendly event. I was able to make it home for that, and it made such an impact on me. Jack was unable to attend, but I said, if there's a way that we can keep doing this and benefit other families for the future, I would love to do that. And we were very fortunate this year that Alec and his wife approached us and said, would you like to do it again? And we jumped at the chance because we just feel so drawn to give back, and people were so supportive of us that we want to do everything we can to help families in the future.
So that's
So the event
Great
itself
story.
would be on a Sunday. With the 12 to 4 is what we had, I think last time, 12 to 4, 12 to 5. And people would come. It would be, they come and it's donation based. They would pay what you will for different activities. We have a raffle, all prizes that are donated. The food trucks that were in attendance the previous time, people bought items, and then those trucks then donated back a portion of their proceeds to the event. Many of the items were actually donated, so it wasn't even anything that was commercialized. All the proceeds went to supporting the individuals that we were trying to fund. So I'm trying to think, Alec, what else am I missing as far as what the event will entail?
So in terms of specific activities, there's a foot race, there's a scavenger hunt. What tell us a little bit about what goes on?
Yeah, so I mean, it really, if you were to picture just we're gonna have like picnics, we're gonna have a Lego building contest, we'll have a raffle, picnic grounds for families to sit and socialize as is appropriate given what's the current state of COVID in October. Right now we're proposing to hold the event October 24th. And it really is just more of like a fall festival feel, is the best way I can describe it. So so bounce houses, foot races, a scavenger hunt. Alec, what else am I missing? It's a Lego challenge.
The goal was to have it be as inclusive as possible and to not charge for things. There's no admission fee. Most of the things were free last time. So we did a kids superhero dash. You signed up for that there was an entry fee. There was a family scavenger hunt. We're going to do something similar. You register for that, but most of the other stuff was free. We had face painting, bounce houses. We had arts and crafts. We had, we're hoping to have maybe a petting zoo this year. Maybe some of the like the Virginia Discovery Museum will probably be there with some sort of exhibit. The goal was to have, as families with young children, what would you want to do on a Sunday afternoon? And so that was kind of the goal.
Thank you. We have the difficult task as a body to discern whether a specific proposal is consistent with the language of the document that we've previously approved. And I can't think of a better cause than this one. And congratulations for your success and all that you've done for the children in the community. Again, I think our task at hand is to thread the needle and determine whether, in fact, this meets the requirements of the document and is not inconsistent with the specific language of that document. So with that long-winded preamble, is there any further discussion amongst our group?
Peter, I would like to just retrace the steps of the history of this easement. First of all, the cause, as you've described it, all three of you, is compelling, and please do not interpret any of my comments to suggest otherwise. When we discussed this easement, as it evolved over a number of months, the major concern is that this would become a property for public events and other events that would change the rural character of the property and its use. A number of those events was also a factor. And we've never, except for this easement, accepted an easement that allowed the public onto the property, except for very narrow educational uses or those related to agriculture. Unfortunately, approving this use would obviate the principle that went into accepting the easement at the outset. And Forbes, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall that when this easement went through various iterations, the reason that there was a list at all was that there had been some historical relationship with those entities which were grandfathered and would terminate in the event the racing ceased.
Yeah,
thereby
my recollection was, Chip, that it was your suggestion that made us list. And there was some opposition to that, but the list, I believe, was done at your suggestion.
But as I recall, the rationale that came forth was that those were events that had been held there and where there was a historical relationship for them to be continued. In this instance, this is a very worthy cause and I'm sympathetic to it, but there are a number of other options in Albemarle County. The university itself could provide Morven or the Polo Grounds or a number of other a number of others that would be entirely suited and used for purposes that are similar. So that this is not the only location where this event could be held, and therefore I think the threshold has to be very high for us to approve it.
But if you read, if you read section 237, which is quoted by the staff, this fits right into it. This is an express charity using the property for perfectly for charitable reasons, and there is absolutely nothing commercial or industrial about it, and therefore I think it fits the bill.
Can I ask a question? Because there is that paragraph, but there's also the list in Exhibit B. Which one rules here?
Can't hear you.
I heard you, John. Which one? Which rules? Neither rules. The list is the historical setting of what has been permitted in the past and may be permitted without specific reauthorization every time by you all. But this 237 is to take up the slack and hopefully permit other charitable or other events which will meet the criteria of this section. So I neither one rules, in my opinion. I think this is an escape valve for new events.
Can I chime in? And I would suggest that to some extent they both rule, but list, the attachment B or exhibit B, and I don't know all the events, but if not all of them, some of them were commercial activities that were by definition deemed by this board not to be commercial. So essentially they were exceptions. For example, the steeplechase races, although they would be equine, I think they are commercial. The antique car show, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if they charge admission or not. I think the races, the women's and the men's 4-miler, I think they charge admission. In any event, I don't want to go all the way down on those. I've thought long and hard about this, and I don't think that commercial and charity are exclusive concepts. That you can have a charitable event and it can have commercial activities involved in it. And I think this body just needs to determine, is this one that constitutes commercial activity? Commerce is very simple. It's an exchange of things of value. So arguably, if I pay $6 for a beer, that's commerce. If I pay $5 for tacos, that's commerce. If I pay a fee to get in to do an activity, that's commerce. It may be for a good cause and it may be charitable, but it doesn't mean that it's not commerce. Charity is a gift. It's a gift without conditions. So when I hear that they say that there's no entry fee, if there were no entry fees at all, and no fees at all, but only here, come and enjoy this and pay what you will, that very well might just be gifts. But here I'm hearing that there's an exchange, and that's what concerns me. I'm not saying this body has to agree with me. I've thought what would be a way forward, and I think there is a way forward, and that is that this body is not prohibited from amending its deeds. Whether that has an effect with the IRS down the road, I don't know that that's our concern. That's the donor's concern. But there is a way, and I think it could be an amendment. So I do think there is a way to approve it. I think there's two ways. This body would determine that this is not a commercial event. And I think if this body were to say that it is a commercial event, I think just basic definitions would support that finding. But I think it's within your discretion to say whether it is or isn't. And the second way is to essentially amend this Exhibit B.
I'd like to say that I don't think that that's the issue. And I don't think that's what Dr. Moses is saying the issue is. The issue really is if we begin allowing charitable organizations and to give events there, are we not opening the door to many more in the future? And how can we turn another one down when we accept this one? I think the issue is not, it's clearly
You're
not.
limited. You're limited to 2 events a month. That's what your deed says. I think it's going to
Is there another event scheduled for October?
get out of
Richie, the races are October the 3rd.
And that's the only other event in October. So the proposal would be October 3rd for the races and October 24th for this.
Well, October 3rd is our race date. Yes, this would be October 24th would be their selected date.
And there's not an intervening event, or is there? Because you are limited to 2 events per month, I believe.
No, there's not an intervening event. No, there are no other events planned other than the races, spring and fall. The list that you have in front of you is a historic list, but there's no activity on that list whatsoever. And our board of directors we get hit with requests all the time, and we basically say, no, absolutely not. It doesn't fit our easement or our goals here. This event does apply to one of our goals of our charitable event in the spring, the races.
So specifically, as it relates to this list of the various events that don't seek prior approval, none of them are in the queue, as I understand it, number one. And number two, so for example, if I were to look at the outdoorsman activity meeting that is allowed once per year, which is a fundraiser, theoretically, we could treat this fundraiser as that specific event. In other words, what we don't want to do is open the floodgates to multiple charitable events of scale.
Agreed. Let me make one correction in what I said. The women's 4 miler is scheduled and the men's 4 miler is also scheduled. Those are foot races that for this year. Last year, we conducted those on the property, or the Charlottesville Track Club conducted them on the property because of COVID. This year, it's undetermined whether it's going to be run on our grass course internally or just park there and run on the roads. I believe the women's 4 miler, the last I heard, and Alec, you can speak to that maybe, but Cynthia indicated that probably would be on the roads. The men will probably be internally on the grass field.
There was some sort of a foot race there within the last month or so, as I recall.
That was back in earlier in the spring. Yes, that was the men's race.
You know,
Richie, to go back to your point, your issue, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Your issue is that to the extent that a beer costs $5, that transcends the line into commerce. Is that correct, versus the entry fee, which is a donation?
So if the entry fee is a suggestion and not required, then I believe that would be purely charitable. It would be a gift and not commerce.
But if you're charging for beer.
So I think, yeah, I hate to say that. And I do to some extent, if there's a purely charitable event, so if they were to open this to the world or to select invitees and not charge anything and just have them come on the property, it would not be a commercial or industrial event, and it would not fall under number 3. And so whether it would fall within Exhibit B or not wouldn't make a difference, because Exhibit B are exceptions to commercial activities. So if the activity is not commercial and it's consistent with the easement, then it would be permitted. So say, for example, the Lorenzonis just wanted to have an open race on Saturday, all comers. No fees, just come out and race. Then that would not be a commercial activity. And I'm not sure, and if 5,000 people came out to race, I'm not sure we would be in a position to contest that. I might be wrong on that, but.
Okay, but look, I remember this, the reason there's this even table with once and twice a year, these 14 occasions, it was in the spirit of what Skip said, is it was the idea to put a negotiated limit on events. This wasn't so much commercial or not commercial. It was just having events there, and you could imagine a lot of charities having an event every week. You could fill the calendar. So that was the spirit of this, was to negotiate with some historical perspective these once or twice. Now, you know, there's charity fundraisers. You know, we got too specific, maybe supported specified equestrian beneficiary. But this begs the issue that you're bringing up, Richie, is to, if you hold a fundraiser, it's a little hard to imagine unless this particular fundraiser would pay for all the food and beer out of whatever is voluntarily paid. I mean, that's a risky approach to raising money. So, so I'm not offering any solution to what you brought up, Richie, but I just remember this discussion, and it was negotiated to be a limiter on any crowd activity on that property. Am I right, Skip?
Yes, and let me put that a different way. Consistent with what Rosa's point, the issue does not swing here on whether this is commercial or charitable or other. It is that it's an event open to the public that is going to involve some number of people. What we wanted to prevent at the outset, before we accepted the easement, was we did not want this to become an event facility. We did not want it to become an event facility for any kind of event, because that would not be in keeping with the public purpose of this authority. The public purpose of this authority is to maintain open space in as much as possible its current state for the benefit of the public, not for the benefit of a private owner or for the benefit of a private recipient of activities that would benefit from being on the property. And we expanded that a bit in deference to the historic role of this property in this community, which goes back at least to the 1950s, where there was a race. And we therefore reasoned, well, all right, if it's agricultural, if it's related to the countryside, if it's related to open space, we could accept it. The antique car show being an exception, but that's concurrent with the race. So we dealt with it that way. And we limited the number of events to 24 a year with no more than 2 a month, because anything more would become inconsistent with the public value of this property. I therefore would suggest that we must have a very high bar to consider anything that deviated from what we've already said deviates substantially. And furthermore, to amend an easement is a very bad precedent. It endangers not only the donor with the IRS, it endangers our ability as a body to accept easements that are approvable by the IRS, so that the repercussions of such an amendment go beyond just the private effect on the donor, but also to us as a body.
If this may not be totally pertinent, but I will tell you, I know you all respect the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. They have gone almost entirely now to public access. That is what they are promoting on all their easements, if any landowner will stand still for it. But they are promoting, and Richie, I think you probably have had some wind of this, that they're very keen on public access. So it's I know you haven't done it in the past, but maybe you'll see more of it in the future.
To me, there are a couple rubs here, but one of the rubs is we don't want to open the floodgate to more events than what we've already agreed to. And I can't imagine moving forward with this without counting this as an event as articulated in this list of items here. So, for example, if we extinguished one of the charity fundraisers that's allowed here and gave permission for this, then we're not expanding the number of events over time on this property. And to me, that goes a long way in stopping the slippery slope that we're all worried about.
Well, there's 10 events not on this list.
Yeah.
I mean, you allowed 24, two a month, and there's only 14 articulated here. So there are 10 more events that I guess, and they can be conducted as long as they're not commercial. So we're back to this point about a commercial activity within a charitable event.
So back to this exchange of money for something. If the beer were available for a suggested donation, and Dr. Coles, I think there's probably a way to make that happen that we both know. And the food were of the same ilk, then would the charity have confidence that it was a worthy endeavor in terms of raising money for the cause?
I would ask Emily or Alec to speak to that.
Yes, I mean, we would definitely be open to that. I mean, we mainly provided that option last time, just to make it simple for families to feed their kids there. But yes, if it's instead of a $5 flat fee for a beer, all the beer is donated anyways. But if instead of buying a beer token, it's a suggested donation, we would be. And if the rub is no food, no drinks, and you guys can have it out there, we'd be open to that too. So.
Can I?
I'm sorry to jump in. If I could just offer one quick clarification. The deed does not permit 24 events per year. It permits the events that are listed and specifies that no more than 2 of those will happen per month.
I think Scott's correct on that.
Thank you.
Following up on what the vice chair, Pete, had to say, is there a way that this could in some way be squeezed into number 10, that is a charity fundraiser to support specified equestrian beneficiary? I mean, is there a way that a portion of the proceeds, and I'm not suggesting any percentage, but if there were an equestrian beneficiary to this, that this would fit within one of the 2 number 10 functions?
I think that would be stretching it to say that it's going to go to an equestrian event, other than, but I suppose if they donated some of the funds back to maintenance of the race course or something of that nature, that goes back to an equestrian use for sure.
How about a therapy riding program or something?
That's what I was thinking. Does the Ronald McDonald House or UVA engage any of the local, I don't know what you call them, farms or horse farms to do equestrian therapy?
Well, there's equestrian therapy, but not necessarily through Ronald McDonald or UVA. But certainly that could be a variation.
What other equestrian beneficiaries does Foxfield direct their fundraisers for? I just don't know. That's why I'm asking.
None at this point, other than the races themselves. So that benefits the agricultural purposes of the races in terms of purses, as well as the donation to the beneficiary. In the fall, it's Habitat for Humanity. In the spring, it'll be pediatric cancer.
But you've got two other charity fundraisers twice a year in addition to the steeplechase races.
That is the steeplechase race. The steeplechase races benefit Habitat in the fall and pediatric cancer in the spring. That's the purpose of the races.
Right, but you have 2 other possibilities or 2 other events that can be used to support specified equestrian beneficiaries.
That's correct. That was put in there initially as such.
So can you squeeze this event into number 10?
Yes.
And I guess my next question is how, and would the board approve that?
How would be to benefit one of the therapeutic riding programs, but we would have to go through the steps to see how that would work. There are 2 here in the county, therapeutic riding programs, and certainly they could benefit from this as well. They're both for children. Well, not all, some of them are PTSD patients as well for therapeutic riding.
I
So
don't think the who matters so much as the what.
I'm sorry,
I said,
I
I don't
couldn't.
think who's benefiting from the writing program doesn't matter so much as long as it's a writing program. I mean, except for you guys are aiming for children, and I get that.
Can't hear any of that.
Yeah, John, your
John,
connection.
your microphone.
He said he didn't think the who it benefited was as important as what. That is, in terms, it's just benefiting an equestrian beneficiary. So, I mean, I know that Foxfield wants, in this event, wants to support children, but it wasn't necessary from his standpoint that the equestrian program had to benefit children. So it could benefit, say, adults with PTSD and fit within number 10.
I don't think.
I have a question. I wonder, I mean, I'm interested in where we're headed with this, but I wonder, is the request like one time, or that this would be one time in the fall? Or is it the request that this, if it were approved, would become always something that if it fell into those specific things would qualify as whatever it was, 10, one of the number 10 on the list? So I wonder that if it's one time or if it would become that. And as much as I'm interested in pursuing where we're headed in this particular part of the conversation, I just worry that, to me, it sounds a little bit like I would want to be careful that we're not saying, you know, take some creative judgments with future potential events and see how you could make them fit in 10. Number 10, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, I worry that, I mean, I think that helps us with the slippery slope thing, and that we aren't in a situation where if we said this was okay and we could make it work, that, you know, we would be forced to, you know, say yes or no to all these different charitable organizations. I think by making it fit within the number of things that are already approved is a strategy that I support. But I also worry that I don't want it to become, you know, this creative license to make things fit within that, even though I guess in the end it's only 2, right? 2 a year events. But I just wondered what if the idea is to have this one time, or maybe again in the future, and then, you know, what we would be asked to say yes or no to what would
Well,
we be?
the Foxfield board's policy was, let's see how this works out. And if it looks like it is a function that we would want to sustain in the future, we would have to come back to you all to see if that is permissible. That was the board's philosophy. And as we said in the application to Mr. Clark, it's a one-time thing for this year.
The worst case scenario, and I certainly get the thrust of this, but the worst case scenario is they're two a year by virtue of this language, right? We're also putting a high bar on the type of event in the terms of making the presence, the food, the beer, the everything else a donation rather than a fee. So that in and of itself is going to limit the number of potential people in addition to the finite number that would want to do this. To me, it makes it a true non-commercial event. And again, if we were to go down this road, there would be only 2 allowed a year, which we've already sanctified, right?
Again, I don't think that commercial or non-commercial is the issue. I think the issue is what is it going to come back year after year? And I think if you, one of the problems with this request is that it's such a compelling charity for us to support. If legal aid came to us and said, we'd like to have our benefit out there, now you wouldn't have nearly as much trouble saying yes or no to that would be my guess. I think the fact that this is such a compelling event makes it more difficult to decide. And I don't honestly, I think we're really dealing with whether we want to change those categories or try to fit things into them, or whether we want to go down that road or not.
Yeah, I do think that, I think both things matter. I think what Dr. Moses is saying and what you're saying matter. And I do think the commercial piece matters. Like when we looked at the language in the deed, I think they're both important. But I think, like, back to what Peter was saying, if it's only 2 per year, because it fits in with what's allowed, what we've said that's on that list. And I get it, it's trying to make something fit, but it isn't even just saying it goes into that, it's 2 per year, it's just one of the 2, because what they're saying is that we would say yes to it this one time, and that anything in the future would come back to us again. Now, I'm not saying
Right.
that it should be yes or no, but to me, that's a little more compelling because it's even more controlled. We're not saying always there's this ability to, have this, even though it is only the 2 per year. But for this event, it is sort of like what they're saying is it's giving it a try one time. And having it come back.
Is beer and food sold at the steeplechases?
Yes, sir, certainly is.
The way I remember it.
Not, beer is not, food is sold, alcohol is not sold at the present time, no.
We're, I believe, reaching the end of the road in time. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
6:12.
So
I think we lose Carolyn at 6:15 and then we lose Scott at 6:25.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I was saying all that, but I was muted at the time.
The answer to that last question is, I knew the answer. So, we're dancing around this commercialization, and we put an event on that list of acceptable activities, and there's the sale of products there. So let's not emphasize that. It's too bad that there's a clause there in 10 and that we're trying to dance around it. We're here to pass some judgment, and my feeling is it's really up to the holder of the property whether they consider this. They could even think of it as raising money on their behalf to be given in total to this other cause. They're hosting it. So they could say, well, we benefit by hosting it. It's part of our mission, and everything we raise while it's hosted by an equestrian oriented group, it's all going to be given to this other charity. So I'm inclined to use one of those charitable events on 10 to cover this one.
Unfortunately, in my experience, the real world doesn't always mesh exactly with these documents. And for example, I think a lot about Garden Week. If one's property, a East property, is on Garden Week and you have 1,200 visitors and they're paying to come see it and so forth and so on. And, is that commercial? Is that, so I guess my long-winded point here is that precision sometimes doesn't apply precisely. And I'm afraid that's the case here. I think
it isn't as though this is the only potential venue for this worthy charitable cause. And I think from Mr. Cowles, your position, I'm not certain that I would want to bring this request to this body in quite this way when there are alternatives.
Well, we either need to table this discussion or come forth with a motion as time is running out.
Well, I'll make a motion that this event be permitted under, and use one of the number 10 opportunities that was afforded to this easement.
And
I'll second.
would your motion include any language relating to the sale or lack thereof of specific?
No, I
items?
think we've already established that list includes the sale of food or other material to raise funds.
Okay, thank you.
They're already in there. I mean, yeah.
I'll second that. And for discussion, I guess I do think we need to be clear about that point, which David was clear about. And then the other point about the benefiting the equestrian part, because we had part of a discussion that sort of indicated one thing to them, and then another take on that was, you know, that it wouldn't be so direct, that they would be donating to. Almost what David's point was, wasn't it almost that they're donating it back to themselves by hosting the event? Or
Right. I mean, that's a little playing to what your point was. Let's not twist everything too much here, but you know, we're allowing only now 14 events, only 2 per month. And that's a pretty restrictive list for this property, but that was negotiated. But I think that in this instance, we could allow the Foxfield organization to decide that this is in the interest of their mission to host these events, and whatever revenues are raised are donated in full to that event, the charity.
David, are you proposing that we accept this to be added to the list, or that this be a one-time?
I'm proposing that one of those 2 charity events allowed per year, that this be one of them. On number 10, then they have 1 left.
Does that require an amendment to the deed?
No, the way I hear the interpretation is that the equestrian beneficiary is Foxfield itself.
Is that acceptable to all parties?
That's not clear to me. I'm not sure I understand. The beneficiary is the charity, right?
In the end,
The language does not specify an amount or a specific cause other than equestrian. And again, not to be cute with the language, but it doesn't. It specifically says an equestrian cause. So it doesn't say 100%, it doesn't say 90%, it doesn't say 5%. And again, I don't want to be manipulative in the language, but that's the way it reads.
Well, if I could suggest, we are a 501c3. That is for the promotion of equestrian events as well as land preservation. That is our charge. And certainly it would fit both of those activities going through the process. And Foxfield Racing can make donations to, if it benefited that aim, then we can then make a donation to Jack Fest out of our funds under the 501c3, I believe.
Yeah, there's no friction in that, I don't think. Well,
and coming back to Skip's point, even though a motion has been made and seconded, it's a question of our findings could be that this is not in violation of the agreed upon number or type of activities that are in that list. We don't have, we don't have to see this as an additional event to what's in that list. We're just saying this fits number 10, one of the number 10 events. It could be more of a finding than any addition.
And David, is that part of your motion?
Well, I could change my motion. That's the intent. That's the intent, is that this is not asking for any additional events of the other beyond the 14. It's using, my motion was to use one of those allowed under item 10.
Well, in
But
order
what do
to,
you call it, a permission or just a finding that they're permitted?
It's consistent.
Yeah.
in order to accept that reasoning, David, we have to agree that using Foxfield property for a recipient that has only by a long stretch anything related to rural or equestrian or agricultural activities is a permitted use on this property. And that's a stretch that I don't think is consistent with the public purpose. Particularly since there are multiple other venues where this event could be held.
And that goes for the women's milers or the women's race.
They were
men's race.
grandfathered in.
That was exactly right. They were grandfathered in.
I'm saying
They're
these
not
were,
relevant in that sense because they're grandfathered in already.
yeah. Were the 2 charity events grandfathered in?
That was the genesis of that list, as I understand it.
Yeah. To me, those are wild cards. They're not specified sufficiently enough to rule out what we're being asked to opine on. I'm not going to say permit, because they may be permitted. We're just trying to decide whether they fit.
Oops.
And there's no danger here of there being more than 2 a year. If we were talking about adding to the 14, then we're in the slippery slope part. Because, okay, they got 15, and then, oh, well, how about this one? Now we have 16 events. There's no slippery slope to this one. They have 14.
Would it make a difference if we were to ask the applicants to come back next month to see if they could modify their program to somehow support specified equestrian beneficiary?
Richie, if Dr. Cole says that will be an eventuality, I don't know that really changes the process here. My personal view is they've said that part of the proceeds will go to an equestrian cause, and we need to make a decision, yay or nay.
And I will point out that we have at most 5 more minutes that we can continue this meeting, whether you all want to make a decision or if you want to ask for more information that would help and postpone.
We have a motion on the floor and we have a second. I believe we have to take it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay,
Roll call, please.
I think we need a roll call.
Please. Yeah.
Let's see, Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
I guess, but with the provision that there's no more than 2 a year and that they find some way to at least get an equestrian beneficiary in there somewhere, even if it's the beneficiary.
That was the motion.
That was the motion.
Sherry's disqualified. Rose Emery, Miss Emery,
Opposed.
Mr. Emmett,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell's absent. Miss Moore
Aye.
and Dr. Moses.
Nay.
It's 4 ayes, and 2 nays.
The motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, that, unless anyone has anything else for the new business or old business, I believe that was all the business we had on the agenda for today. I'm sorry to rush things to a close, but we are about to lose our Zoom slot here.
Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Aye.
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 Dr. Holmes, thank you for joining us. Good luck with your event.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.